Welcome back, flockers, to another episode of Between Two Cars. I just got done filming the one you guys probably just got done watching yesterday, and yeah, today we're continuing. We're keeping it going, keeping it going. Today we're going to talk about some car mods or car areas that a lot of people skip out on when it comes to building a car that you shouldn't. This is crucial stuff. And a lot of people fucking cheap out and skip out on it. And it ruins their build. It ruins it. So do not do this. Anyways, it's pretty hot. I probably look rough. I still got to poop. And yeah, let's dive right in. All right, so what am I talking about exactly? Well, essentially, when people are building a car, there's some foundational shit that you should not skip before you do other mods. Let's take a Mustang, for example. Gee, I wonder why he said that. Well, a Mustang is a great example because a lot of people get them, and they are very easy to modify. You could throw a supercharger on most Coyotes, and yeah, they'll make good power, and your car will be fast. But what good is that if you're going to die? Not much good at all, actually. That's probably pretty bad. But so let's talk about it. Well, with most cars, once you start adding power, your car wasn't designed to have that power from factory. Manufacturers do this thing that it's called a cheaping out. And so they don't expect every car and everybody to be street racer Paul Walker. So they might cheap out on suspension. They might cheap out on brakes. And they might cheap out on this, and that. So where should you start? Well, personally, if you're going to go fast, then you have to be able to stop fast. So get a good braking system. Most cars nowadays, at least performance cars like Mustangs and Camaros and Corvettes, they have good brakes. But this little 3-valve here, you see, back in 2006 when this car was made, I doubt they expected somebody to put a futuristic Coyote motor in it and make over 900 wheel horsepower. And so it had little tiny, peeny-weeny, little tiny brakes. Well, that's no bueno. You need brakes. So I went ahead and upgraded to some aerospace components brakes with some high heat-resistant brake pads. These will start to fade at 800 degrees. I don't know if that's Fahrenheit or Celsius. It's probably Fahrenheit. But yeah, they will start to fade at like 800 degrees. So that's pretty damn hot, which is plenty for my application, hopefully. I have to still go out and test them. But we're waiting on some parts so I can do that. But braking systems on a lot of these older JDM cars, these older muscle cars, they suck. So if you're gonna go fast, you gotta be able to stop just as fast. So upgrade your brakes, guys. Whether you do a full conversion kit like on the Supra, I think I'm gonna go with CTSV conversion. Essentially, CTSV brakes seem to bolt right up. So you buy the calipers and you buy the brake rotors, and they should bolt right up. So I think that's what I'm going to go with to have some nice big brakes. But we'll have to see once I go ahead and map all that out. Regardless, though, brakes, brakes, brakes. Because if you don't learn how to brake, you're going to break something. And that's no bueno. So brakes, brakes, brakes. Brakes are very important. If I had a hardcore brake sponsor, I would be glazing them right now. I would be fucking glazing them. But Aerospace Components has been a decent sponsor for me. And they hooked me up a little bit on this kit, so check out Aerospace Components. They're pretty good. But they're more for drag racing, so just keep that in mind. Anyways, brakes. Do that. Brake pads, brake rotors, brake calipers. Can't go wrong with it. And it's going to save your life, probably. So, brakes. Let's talk about something that a lot of cars will suffer from, and that's bad suspension. Once again, if you're buying an older car, two things are going to be true. Either your suspension is going to be just under-engineered, and it's not going to know that you're a speed racer, so it's not going to be able to handle your quick turning or your crazy power or your crazy throttle. So upgrading your suspension is a great, great, great thing. You could start with bushings. You can then go to control arms. You can then go to spherical joints. You can then go to full-on redoing your whole suspension to make it what it's not even supposed to be. Like I did on this fucking turd right here. The rear end on this used to be just like the Panhard bar and some springs and shit. Now it's a full-on torque arm Watts link. It's kind of nutty, but it makes it so much better to drive when I gun it and it doesn't hook. Essentially, the way the Mustang is set up from factory, how will I explain this? Maybe with these water bottles? I don't know. Essentially, imagine the top water bottle is the chassis and the bottom water bottle is the wheels. So, you know, the wheels would be spinning like this. Before, with the Panhard bar, when you would gun it and it squats, it pushes the rear end out to the side a little bit. So that's why you'll see Mustangs sometimes, and they'll have dog shit fitment when they lower their car. It's because they don't have an adjustable Panhard bar, so their rear end is sticking out on one side. So essentially, if this is your chassis, again, it would be going like this. So again, this would be coming towards you. And you gun it, your rear end is going to kick out. So it's going to squat and kick out, squat and kick out. A Watts link makes it so everything goes straight up and down. So when I gun it in this car, nothing moves left to right. It is just up and down, and this thing just goes and just, you know, comes right at you. So probably a very bad description, but you can look up videos on Watts links and stuff like that. But that is kind of overkill for most people, unless you're building a high horsepower race car. You probably don't need a Watts link, but just upgrading your suspension, your control arms, your bushings. Bushings are major. We just did bushings on the Corvette, kept the stock control arms, and this thing feels like a goddamn rocket. It's just a go-kart on rails. It is so nimble. It feels so much better. It's lovely. The reason why I keep looking out the window as well is I'm waiting on some spark plugs for this thing. So once they come, I can install them, and I'm excited for that. But yeah, control arms, bushings, shot BMR, Peacock 7. They are a big sponsor of this channel. Love BMR. Keltrack Racing. They are a sponsor as well. Love Keltrack Racing. Love BMR. They just, again, combine them both, and you're just going to be winning races left and right. That's you cheering. You're cheering. You're cheering at the races. So, yeah. Let's go ahead. Actually, I have a suspension part right here, so we could talk about this a little bit more in depth. I just ordered some new suspension for the Supra. It is stock stuff, but it is decent stock stuff. Like, this looks like a pretty well-made control arm, in my opinion. It's not flimsy. It's not pressed metal or anything. It is a decent control arm. So there's a couple different components. This is an upper control arm for the front suspension of my Supra. This is actually the passenger side, although it's probably interchangeable. Well, anyways, these are bushings. So these are rubber bushings, and I mean, they're decent, but if you upgrade to Delrin or poly or spherical, then that is going to stiffen up your flex. Essentially, imagine your bushings are like a second spring because they're rubber. So 3,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds on your car, this rubber is going to compress whether you like it or not. So it's a separate spring. If you upgrade it to something stiffer like poly or Delrin like we did on this, it no longer has anywhere to compress in there. So when you give it an input, it's going to just direct everything straight to the wheels, and it's not going to have these little cushions in its way, which is really lovely. And again, it makes the car feel so much more nimble. There's a lot less slack in it and a lot less delay. It is just whoop, 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 whoop. It feels great. So suspension is great. If this control arm was made of like cheap steel, like stamped steel or something, then I would upgrade it. But I mean, this is a nice piece of aluminum, it seems. I don't really think it's worth upgrading. I think it's good. And even the bushings, I mean, they look pretty decent. The Supra is ultimately a straight line car, so it doesn't really matter. But upgrade your suspension. Here's a nice ball joint right here. And this is how it should be. It should be stiff. It shouldn't be super floppy where you can wiggle it and shit. It should be nice and stiff like that. So if yours are all blown out and all that fun stuff, go get some new ones pressed in. It's not that expensive, and it'll make your car feel much, much better. So do that. Please, seriously, do that. But yeah, suspension, big upgrade that I highly recommend. And it'll change how your car handles. It'll help put power to the ground. It'll help keep power on the ground. And if you are like a track guy or a canyon guy, It'll help you through corners and all that fun stuff. So suspension, don't sleep on it. Shop BMR, Peacock 7, shop Keltrack Racing. I don't think I have a discount code for them, but if I do, maybe it's Peacock 7. It's all good stuff though. But let's move on. Okay, this is specifically towards Mustang people, but I'm sure other manufacturers suffer similar consequences. Transmissions, specifically manual transmissions. I don't know much about automatics or building automatics or torque converters or any of that shit because I'm a fucking man. I stroke my own shit like a man does. I don't need a little machine to stroke my shit for me. I don't need that. So I'm not going to talk on something I'm not too familiar with, but manual transmissions, yeah, upgrade your clutch, first things first. However, once you upgrade your clutch, and if your transmission is not tough, you're going to break it. I actually just recently threw out the piece of my old stock transmission that was shattered. I still have the transmission. It's upstairs. I use it as a table. But the input shaft snapped, and I actually had it. And I was cleaning out my parents' garage yesterday, and I found it. And the input shaft literally snapped, and it was just a chunk of it. And I threw it out. I didn't really care for it. But yeah, upgrade your transmission. Now, personally, I wouldn't upgrade it until it breaks, unless you plan on selling your stock transmission. If it's like an MT82 and you have money and you want to buy a built one and you're doing the core swap, or you want to buy a T56, then maybe just buy it. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it when it comes to these types of parts, because hell, it might last a while. I had a W58 in my Supra. I could turn off noise canceling now because the washing machine finally shut up. I had a W58 in my Supra, and everyone told me, oh, it's going to break, it's going to break, it's going to explode. I was making 500 something wheel horsepower. Oh, it's going to break. I'm over here fucking... No, I don't think I ever used anti-lag on it. I did brake boost, though. But, yeah, essentially, everyone was telling me it was going to break. It didn't break. I then took it out and put it into Project WAP, and it broke within like 2 weeks, ironically. So you just never know when it comes to transmissions. Sometimes they'll last, sometimes they won't. Project WAP made way less power too. So I don't know if it was a power issue or if it was just tired or what, but essentially I wouldn't upgrade it till it breaks, but just be ready for it to break. If you're pushing big power out of a MT82 or a weaker Tremec, like what comes in a 3-valve, it's gonna break. And I remember when I first bought this car and it was making 500 wheel horsepower, I didn't understand the concept that car parts just broke like that. Like, I didn't understand that. Like, I knew car parts obviously have limits, but I knew that motor-wise. I didn't know, oh, the transmission's gonna explode, it's gonna snap. I didn't understand that. And so when I started doing research onto, you know, how to make sure your car doesn't break, because, you know, I was not a 19-year-old. How old was I when I bought this car? Was I 19? I don't think so. I might have been 19. Fuck, I don't know. But when I was that age and I bought this car, I didn't know the concept, so I just was researching, and it was like, yeah, you got to be careful. Your transmission can break. Oh, well, what causes transmissions to break? Oh, too much power and too much grip. That's essentially what it is. If you have too good of tires and your shit is hooking, you're going to find the weak links real quick, and that's what happened with this thing. Once I changed out not the factory wheels, but the 20-inch wheels that I bought the car on, and I put on some good wheels and some good tires, and this bitch was hooking from second gear, I remember when it broke. I was racing down in Mexico, and I was racing, I forgot who I was racing, but essentially I got on it, whoop, shifted to third, and just immediately went, it was neutral everywhere because my input shaft was broken. And I was praying it was my drive shaft. It wasn't. It was my input shaft. So the car was broken for a few months. And yeah, I had to save up and buy a transmission. And that's what happened. And that's when my YouTube was like starting to kick off. So you guys thankfully helped pay for it. And that transmission is still in this car, which is a sign. Buy once, cry once. Trust me, a transmission, a T56 for this car isn't cheap. It's not a cheap purchase. I believe it was like $5,000 or $6,000. And as a 19 or 20-year-old at the time, dude, that was a lot of fucking money to me. So, yeah, just be ready because it will break. But if you want to go ahead and knock yourself out and do it sooner so you could just drive peacefully, you could do that as well. But, yeah, that wasn't a fun day personally. I'm just going to go ahead and say that wasn't the most pleasant of days in my opinion. But it is what it is. Anywho, yeah, transmissions, drivetrains, drive shafts. Drive shafts, if it's a two-piece drive shaft, that bitch gonna break eventually. I'm going to tell you what, that bitch gonna break. She gonna break. So just be ready. I've seen carbon fiber drive shafts break. I've seen aluminum drive shafts break. They all eventually will break, potentially. So just be ready for it. And yeah, don't cheap out on that. Again, no point in having a fast car if everything else is dog shit. So just be ready for when that happens. I'm going to go take a shit and then we will continue this video. All right, I feel about 2 pounds lighter after that pleasant experience. And I saw the horrible Shrek 5 teaser trailer. Oh my God, that looked horrible. But anyways, let's continue. So we covered brakes, we covered suspension, we're starting to cover drivetrain. With drivetrain comes axles, but honestly, depending on your car, you could probably skip out on those. I'm still on stock axles in my Mustang, and again, I make a lot of horsepower, but live or solid rear axles like this car has are just naturally stronger. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to do a dig race, but they're naturally stronger, so you might be okay depending on your car. So I'm not going to, again, tell you to spend your money if I haven't done it myself. But yeah, other than those minor little things, I guess we can talk about some places that could help you. Factory seats are usually pretty darn heavy. Now, they might have built-in airbags, so if you take them out, you might get a code or something that you might have to clear, depending on your car. But aftermarket seats are a good way to lighten up your car and also just keep you glued to the seat, depending on your driving style. If you're in the canyons, you could be tossed around a lot, so aftermarket seats is something that a lot of people overlook. Same with like short throw shifters and stuff. Some people love them, some people don't. Depending on the car, I think it works, but a short throw shifter is a good little easy way to just maximize your fun and technically make you faster if you really think it matters that much. Like, okay, yeah, technically you are shifting slightly faster, but I think it's not even really measurable. So yeah, like literally, what's the difference between me pulling back 3 inches to 2.5 inches? You know, like it's not that much different, but it could make shifting more consistent, in which case I do think it's beneficial for that. Where is my damn package, man? I want to install these goddamn car parts. I want my car to be fast. You know what pisses me off? This triggers me. Amazon said all of my 8 spark plugs were coming today. And then today it says 6 of them are coming and 2 of them are not. That triggers me. I'm low-key pissed off about that. But yeah. Also, what else? Safety devices. If you're going to be building a car, roll cage and stuff, harness, bar, sure, whatever. Fire extinguisher is a good option. Trust me, I'm talking from experience. But I mean, honestly, after pondering on the toilet, I think I kind of covered all of the basics and all of the important ones. The rest of them might be very, very car specific, like oil pump gears or crank hubs or rod bearings and stuff like that. Those all might be pretty specific, but I think for the most part, the ones I covered are good. I believe so. Also, don't cheap out on tires. Definitely don't cheap out on tires. You could cheap out on wheels all you want, don't cheap out on tires. If you cheap out on wheels, yeah, you might get a lighter or a heavier, cheaper wheel. But if you cheap out on tires, you're just not going to have a good time. They're either going to explode or you're not going to hook ever. Just don't do it. So, yeah. Anyways, let me know your thoughts down below. Any of them that I missed, I'm sorry. I went and pooped and came back and didn't give you guys a whole lot more content. I would rather save your guys' time than hear me ramble and yap for another 10 minutes about shit that you guys probably already know. But yeah, don't cheap out on that type of stuff. Please don't. Anyways, subscribe, and until next rant, peace.